Tonight, genes are getting a lot of blame lately for human problems. You may recall that just the other day, scientists reported they'd found a gene linked to obesity. And now, a convicted criminal is trying to blame his genes for driving him to kill. CBS News correspondent Bob McEwen investigated the case for tonight's Eye on America.
Sometimes they throw up and they land on people's heads.
John had a great sense of humor. John was a good friend, a good brother. He was very hardworking.
Nina Collins remembers her 24-year-old son, John, as a young man who'd make any mother proud.
One of his ideas was that he would own his own pizza store. He really enjoyed the business and the people contact.
But then came the night in February 1991 at Domino's Pizza outside Gainesville, Georgia. John Collins was working late when Tony Mobley walked through the door to rob the place.
He had John on his knees with a gun at his head, begging for his life. When they found John, he had the insides of his pockets turned out to indicate that, see, I don't have any more money.
Mobley was tried for the murder of John Collins and convicted. He was sentenced to death.
I believe that he is an evil person. He is a predator. He chose to murder a man and now should be punished accordingly.
Tony Mobley does not deny what he did here on that night almost 4 years ago. But now his lawyers are making an argument that no American court has ever heard before, that Mobley may suffer from a genetic disorder that leaves him predisposed to aggressive behavior and acts of violence. In other words, that when Mobley murdered John Collins, his genes may have made him do it.
Tony, almost from the time he was born, demonstrated an inability or an impaired ability to control his impulses.
Mobley's trial lawyer, Dan Summer, appealed the death penalty on the basis of Mobley's troubled extended family. 5 Mobleys have gone to prison for robbery, rape, and now murder. Summer says his client is a victim of heredity.
I truly feel that his conduct cannot be explained any other way. And the science certainly suggests the possibility that there is a genetic basis for some of his conduct.
Indeed, there is a growing body of research linking genetics and aggressive behavior. In a landmark study published in the prestigious journal Science, researchers at Harvard recently identified a mutant gene in an extended family in which men were unusually prone to violence. Another study found that people with low levels of a brain chemical called serotonin are up to 40% more likely to be aggressive or impulsive.
There's definitely a clear link between genetics and aggressive behavior. It's not an exclusive link, but it's a substantial link.
His genes didn't do that. Tony Mobley made a whole series of choices that night that he killed John. He put the gun to the back of John's head and he pulled the trigger.
You're not concerned here that in some way you're opening up a Pandora's box, something that could allow people to rationalize murder?
If in fact some segment of violent offenders, the recidivists, have some type of genetic mutation that can be treated and perhaps cured one day, that's something we all have an interest in.
Even if the Mobley case does make U.S. legal history, it will raise far more questions than answers. If a genetic disorder can cause violence, what will society do to those who have it? And what would happen if the gene were found before birth? But there's a more basic question. Whatever science says, could anything, in any way, excuse what Tony Mobley did to John Collins? In Gainesville, Georgia, this is Bob McEwen for Eye on America.
A footnote, a lawyer hired by Mobley's family, which is understandably upset by the defense strategy, has now filed a formal request that Dan Summer be removed from the case. That issue has not been resolved.
From the Menendez brothers to Lorena Bobbitt, it's become a common occurrence to see defendants come into court and blame someone or something else for their crimes. Now, a man on death row in Georgia is raising a new defense. He's blaming members of his family he's never met. ABC's Julie Johnson explains.
Stephen Anthony Mobley was convicted of killing John Collins during a robbery at this North Georgia pizza carryout.
Mobley actually basically turned him around and had him kneel down and shot him in the back of the head execution style.
A Georgia jury sentenced him to die in the electric chair. In fighting the death sentence given here by a Hall County jury, Tony Mobley's trial lawyer raised an unusual issue: the possibility that his client may suffer from a genetic predisposition to violence.
If he was born this way, he shouldn't be punished by being executed.
Trial lawyer Dan Summer took the case one step beyond what has been called the abuse excuse. He based his appeal in part on testimony from a Mobley second cousin who traced the family tree over 4 generations. Those 4 generations included 3 serious crimes. Trial transcripts show a murder, armed robbery, and rape.
The record speaks to the fact that there was something going on in the family that suggests a genetic or biological basis for behavioral problems.
That is an argument some find ludicrous.
This was another example of someone who wanted to say, wait a minute, it's not my fault. I had this gene that made me do it.
Mobley's appeal was based in part on the findings of a study published in 1993 in the journal Science. The study, although inconclusive, found that genetic defects might be a factor in one violent and aggressive family in the Netherlands. But the research is both new and controversial.
We're not at the place scientifically where biological or genetic data can reliably be brought forward in an individual case.
In Stephen Anthony Mobley's case, it did not matter. Yesterday, the Georgia Supreme Court rejected his appeal. But as the science of genetics develops, the argument that a defendant was genetically compelled to commit a crime is bound to return. Julie Johnson, ABC News, Hall County, Georgia.